and I host the Enthusiasm Enthusiast podcast, which, if you have not yet heard it, which I'm sure you will, I interview influential feminists about the things that they are most passionate about. So it goes without saying that I am very enthusiastic to be here. I am very enthusiastic about these people and what we're going to talk about today. So I want to do a quick thank you to Ever and Ariel for having us and the organizers of this group. So we're going to talk today about inclusion as a pillar of podcasting. Because one of the reasons that I went to Ever and I said, this is the topic that I want to talk about, is that more than any other medium, film, television, books, podcasting really has given space to people who have typically been left out of big media conversations. And I think we're doing a good job, but I know we can do better. So I wanted to bring some people who have done incredible work, basically targeting and keenly speaking to demographics, but also using the power of really great storytelling to go beyond who their targeted groups are. So, first up, I want to introduce you to Ahmed. She is a storywriter, a storyteller, a writer, a politico, and she is one half of the Good Muslim, Bad Muslim podcast, which is very well acclaimed. You may have seen it in Oprah Magazine, Wired, and BuzzFeed. So let's give it a round of applause. So next up, we have Jay Connor. He is a writer, a producer, and one of the co-founders of the Extraordinary Negroes podcast, which his writing has been in the New York Times, has been in The Root, and many other publications. And the Extraordinary Negroes podcast was featured on Apple Podcasts for Black History Month, so let's give it up for Joe. And then finally, we have Josh Hallmark. Josh Hallmark describes himself as an HIV-positive gay podcaster. I describe him as the godfather of independent podcasting. And the reason is because he hosts the Karen and Alan Letters and produced that show, Playlist podcast, as well as his crown jewel, Our Americana. And so the other thing you should know about Josh is that he created the hashtag 2pods-a-day, which is an incredible way for independent podcasters and audiences to find each other. So, quick round of applause for my beautiful. So, one of the reasons that I wanted to have this group talk about this subject is that, like I said, we're in a space where we can give voice to people who aren't always invited to the table. But there are ways we can do that better. Also, I love the idea that, I know for my show, I jokingly say sometimes, for the two straight white men that are listening, and then I will have my straight white men who are listening go, no, I'm listening. So one of the things I wanted to hear about is how you navigate your relationship with your targeted demographic and the people who are outside of that demographic. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can get started. I'm very excited to be here. The reason why Zara and I started our podcast, we started 4 years ago, which is like ancient history when it comes to the world of podcasting. We started a podcast because we were really enjoying the conversation we were having. We were two Muslim women that were just, chit-chatting in the car. We're like, this should be a podcast. And it took us a year to finally get the resources to make that happen. And it's really interesting because Zara and I are very different people. I have a very political, radical politics background. She's more mainstreamy, comedian. And I like to say that, when I'm recording our podcast, I'm really speaking to the brown girl that's all by herself out in the middle of Nebraska who doesn't have any other brown friends and is looking for that community. Zara has a white husband and it speaks very well to white people. So we have these kind of back and forth where we kind of started our podcast with two different audiences. And I think that led to a really interesting mix for the kind of people that do listen to our podcast. We also were on NPR on. So we were in Oprah magazine. Those are very white spaces. So we were getting a lot of white people listening to our very brown podcast, which is meant for brown people. And I think one of the things that happened because of that was we had to have conversations early on. How do we talk about what it means to be brown on our show? And we were getting a lot of questions in our emails saying, like, can you please explain this term? Can you please define this? And we're like, no, we're not going to do this. I mean, Zara and I had to have a conversation. I was like, I'm not going to define terms. And she was like, but we have to. I'm like, no, we don't actually have to. We can do whatever we want because we're running our own thing. So we have deliberately chosen not to define terms unless there are terms that we don't know of each other. Because she has a Shia background, I have a Sunni background in this religion. So there's a lot that we don't know of each other. So we define those terms, but we are approaching it like we want our audience to be smart enough to know how to Google, and that they are confused by something that they don't understand on our podcast. There's resources out there for them. It's not our show. And one of the things that has really come up because of that was that we started getting fan mail like a year or two into it that was saying, this is the conversation that I've always wanted to like listen into, but I thought I wasn't allowed to listen into. And I think when it comes to solidarity, building dialogue and connection over ethnic and racial boundaries, that's really important. We don't need to dumb down our needs and our conversation for other people. We should expect everyone to meet us at our level. And I think that's been really helpful and empowering for me also to know that, like, when it comes to building solidarity, it's not about making our stories stupid for other people to understand. It's about leveling up and expecting other people to level up for that.
Love it. Thank you. Jade, can you talk a little bit about your experience with people inside and outside your listeners?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know, like, with our show, we felt like our show was built out of necessity. We saw a market out there that wasn't necessarily catered to, and to Taz's point, you know, we just try to operate from a position of we're not in the business of emotional labor. We don't explain things that people don't understand. We feel like, you know, we're going to provide this information and provide our thoughts and opinions, and if you don't understand it, then you need to do the homework yourself. But at the same time, we try to maintain a level of authenticity in what it is that we do, because with our show specifically, you know, we discuss like really heavy, relevant issues, but we infuse humor to kind of, you know, take the edge off and make them relatable. So we feel like in providing this digestible content, we've done our job. You know what I mean? Whether you're black, white, you know, whatever. But we just try to remain that, you know, keep that authenticity and just be true to ourselves and just, you know, allow people to kind of do their own homework.
That's great. So, Josh, your perspective is a little bit different because our Americana basically goes into small towns and tells what I deem to be unique stories from small towns. So you're not necessarily like trying to reach, you know, the LGBT audience, though they are always welcome to listen. So I know that your show, you really are thoughtful about hearing from people we don't hear from. I find in podcasting, we're still missing a lot of people in the conversation. We're missing economically disadvantaged people. We're missing blue-collar workers. There's still a lot of stories we're just not hearing. So how did you come to decide that these are the stories you wanted to tell and these are the people you wanted to see?
From personal experience, really, you know, inclusivity is such a strange word because it has a very narrow definition, right? Which is a space for everybody at the table. But everybody's idea of what that looks like is so different, and I think we get really myopic about inclusivity. Especially lately, and you know, we could relitigate 2016 for probably the next 50 years. I don't think anyone wants to. But I think we forgot. It became so much about inclusivity means making sure that we're representing gay people and making sure we're representing, you know, ethnic minorities and making sure we're representing these people who have been marginalized. But what happens is, and I hate this word, but it's, or this phrase, but it's a real thing. Like coastal elites is a real thing, and we stopped paying attention to the other people. And so by being too inclusive, we actually became exclusive. And so I went in, I took this road trip, which was the impetus of my podcast, and I had this idea of what small town America looked like, and it wasn't a place that I felt safe. It was a place full of bigots and Trump supporters and people who didn't know how to have conversations about anything other than because I wasn't giving these people a voice, and I wasn't giving them the opportunity to have conversations where we could understand where they're coming from. And so my position, and I agree with you, as a gay man, it is not my responsibility to teach you empathy towards the LGBTQ community. However, as a podcaster, it is my privilege. And so I look at it as like, I want to reach everybody who was like me and had such a narrow idea of these people and say, let's have a conversation and let's understand each other, because the only way we're going to find middle ground is if we both get to hear each other out.
It's so interesting because one of the things that I talk a lot with my guests on my show is there's this vibe of people constantly saying, we've got to reach across the aisle, we've got to reach across the aisle. And I bristle at that because I think like, well, no, it's not really my job to convert people to my philosophy or way of thinking. But I do think so much about podcasting is listening. Even when you're hosting, even when you're creating, how many times do we listen to our shows before we hit publish? And I think part of that responsibility is also in curation and who we include. So for me, one of the things that I set out to do on my show is I have a hashtag called Do Better White Ladies. And sometimes that means I find a story of a terrible white lady who's done a terrible thing, and I go, hey, do better, white ladies, come on. And sometimes it's like a little bit more insidious, and it's a little bit more like, I know you can be better than this. And because I can pass for a white feminist, I can kind of infiltrate and get in there and then say like, hey, no, you're off on this, you're wrong for this. So what I decided with my show is I wanted to have some things I didn't compromise about, which is that I wasn't going to, if you look at pictures of all of my guests, they all don't look the same. They're not all the same age. They're not all the same profession. I have that luxury because I do an interview show. What are some things about each of your shows that you do not compromise?
I mean, for us, it's definitely the not defining terms. The other things that we don't compromise on, I don't compromise on my politics at all. And I think what's been interesting about that is Zara's politics, because she came as a comedian, not as an activist, when she entered this space of working with me. She's really grown, and I think that's been a really interesting process, is to kind of like see her grow into an activist over the course of 4 years of working together.
You radicalized her.
I radicalized her, and it's cool if you like are able to like listen to it in that way. I don't know. I think that's those are the biggest ones for me.
Yeah. Is this on? Okay. Yeah. I feel like our show existing is a matter of just not compromise. I mean, I think just as far as just continuing to put the content out and discussing the issues that we do on the show is a matter of not compromise. But I think one thing that I refuse to compromise on is always being respectful of women's agency and always making sure that we make a conscious effort to bring women onto the show, because I know that operating from a cis perspective, a lot of times men will always bring other men on their show, and it'll become kind of like this machismo energy. And I always make a point to always bring as many black women on there as humanly possible, or to involve them in the conversation, just because I want to make sure that agency is seen. So I would definitely say that.
I also like when you talked on your show about not addressing the word Negro in the title of the show, and how you were getting like blowback from your own community about using that term. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, a lot of people are not feeling it. Oh yeah, a lot of people weren't feeling it, but I think at the same time, I don't think we necessarily did a great job of explaining the reasoning behind the title, because the title means that regardless of how extraordinary, how exceptional, how well you are as a black person, you're always going to be seen as inferior. So that's the premise behind the name of the show. And a lot of times people don't understand that, and especially they feel like they have this level of like respectability politics where they feel like you shouldn't present yourself in this manner because you're going to be treated this way or looked at this way. And I'm like, look, I'm going to be looked at that way anyway, so I might as well maintain my authenticity and be true to who I am and my vision and my message. And help other people and use my platform to empower others.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Can you talk about?
Yeah. So I'm gonna tear down the fourth wall. Forgive me. We had a conference call a few days ago, and Katie said, "I want to talk about this specifically," and I had a visceral reaction of like the list of things that I would not compromise on. And then I realized that while personally that is the truth, in my podcasting I have divorced myself from that. And there's an important reason for that, because as soon as I say, like, I'm not willing to compromise on this, then there's no growth. There's no middle ground. And, you know, I have had Trump supporters on the show, I've had evangelists on the show, and, you know, egotistically there is a level of, like, I want to give them enough rope to hang themselves, but, like, that's not super productive. So I do want to understand where they're coming from, because this is what we've done in America, is we're so busy defending ourselves that we're not hearing other people. And, you know, I screw up. I called Trump a dickhead one time, and, you know, I said Pence was a homophobe. I stand by those things, but it's not productive, because then I'm not understanding where people are coming from, and then I can't help them reach me and understand where I'm coming from. So I don't draw a line. I'm not going to nurture bigots, but I also don't want to have a conversation with someone I think is a bigot and let that be the baseline for the conversation. I want to understand why they are a bigot, and maybe I can help them understand why that's hurtful to me as a gay man. You know, I say the more you are unwilling to compromise, the less productive you're going to be in changing people's minds. And I know that's a hard thing, especially as a marginalized person, because you feel like you've compromised your whole life. But we have to meet people in the middle.
Do you mind talking a little bit about the decision to discuss your status in your podcast? It's that episode, I hope you will go back and listen to Josh's podcast. It's the only episode of any podcast I've ever listened to 3 times, because I just needed to hear the story again. And I think people who are HIV positive, we get a lot of like, here's what happens in the 80s, and wasn't that devastating, and look at all the people we lost. And then we got a lot of like, well, we're doing okay now. And I think there's space in there for representation. So can you talk a little bit about how you came to the decision to discuss your stats?
Yeah, so it was a huge break from format for me, and I was very nervous about that, because my show, I try to make it not about me. I'm here to share other people's stories, and as soon as I make it about me, then I'm diluting the power of those stories. But there's a small town in Austin that has the highest rate of HIV outside of sub-Saharan Africa, Austin, Indiana. I think 6% of the town has HIV. And it's in Pence country, so there was a lot of let's just ignore it. And I thought it was important to tell that story and talk about like how this happened. You know, because we talk about like, oh, HIV, we need to be better about making sure people have access to meds and making sure that there isn't stigma around it, but we don't really talk about how an entire town becomes HIV positive and the emotional ramifications of that. And so I found myself, it was a 3-part series, and I had finished the first part, and I felt like there was something really dishonest about sharing the story and not sharing my story. And so I just wedged it in the middle. I didn't really give a lot of context, and I just felt like, okay, here's a reason that maybe that people feel like they can't relate to it, can, because they know me, and what we do is so intimate, you know? I think we take for granted that we are in people's ears sometimes 3 hours a week. They're alone painting their house or doing chores and listening to us. And so maybe when I hear about Austin, Indiana being HIV positive and having an opioid epidemic, they can't relate to that. But hey, you know me, so let me share my story and then maybe you'll care. So I think it's like 45 minutes long. It was like a fever dream. Like I sat down with a microphone and just started talking, and I have to go back because I don't even know what I said, which is probably what's going to happen in about an hour. I'm going to be like, did I just make an ass of myself? So I just kind of told my story, and it was very cathartic, but I think also we talk about meds and the physicality of HIV, which honestly, and you know, activists are going to hate me for saying this, like, there aren't huge physical ramifications of being HIV positive. You know, there is the access to medication, which is, you know, a whole nother conversation, but every day I'm fine. I'm no different than any one of you, but I think the emotional ramifications have been so severe in ways that I probably can't even quantify or wrap my head around yet 10 years later. So I think it was important to say, like, HIV isn't just a disease, it's a disease that, because of the way the world looks at it, really, pardon my French, fucks with the people who have it. Because you become, like, even in the gay community, it's, are you clean? And so the opposite of that is, are you unclean? And, you know, you're having to have these weird conversations with people, and then you feel like you have to, like, quantify why you have it, as though that should matter. Like, oh, well, as long as, you know it wasn't drug use or me being a whore, then maybe it'll be okay. I'm like, that shouldn't matter. And so I wanted to share that, so people could go back and hear about these people who got it through drug use and care and not, want to chastise them.
I think that's beautiful. And
Thanks.
I can tell you, having listened to it 3 times, you did great.
Thank you.
So one of the other things that I wanted to make sure that other independent podcasters would get from this conversation is the dance between getting media, getting the public to know more about your show and how that actually translates into either more listens or better opportunities and what the reality of that is. So I know that you've gotten a lot of, like you said, we were on NPR, Oprah, a little startup called Oprah. And so, 1, how did you get in those spaces? And 2, what did it do or not do for your show?
How do we get in those spaces? I think for people that don't know my background and Zara's background is that we've been out in the public doing things for a long time. So when we started our podcast, we had already developed a following for our respective projects. So we didn't just start just cut. So because of that, and my day job is I'm a digital media advocacy organizer for 18 Million Rising. So we're kind of like an Asian American one. So I have a background in doing online organizing, which is very helpful. And so before our first show even dropped, we were doing interviews for PRI because I had those connections. Because I know how to do media. So I mean, these are actual hard skills that you need to know how to do if you're gonna, if you want to like explode that big when you come to the scene. But it also meant that we got a lot of people who I didn't think that our podcast was meant for. But I think it just changed my mind on a lot of things when it comes to that, because I think what's been great is that to find that one brown girl in Nebraska, you do have to get on NPR because they don't have access to the regular kind of South Asian media landscape that I have access to. And so there's a lot of, for me that was really important to make sure that was in mind. I think that one of the biggest issues with the podcasting world is that there is this kind of like strive for getting subscribers and downloads and making sure you get those big numbers, but there's like my organization's called 18 Million Rising. So there's 18 million Asian Americans. There's like, I think a recent study that says 8 million Muslims. If you think about like how many people are listening to podcasts, I'm personally not striving for numbers because I know that the population isn't there. I'm striving to get that target audience to listen to us. Because of that, one of the issues that kept coming up when we were first starting to sell ads, everyone was like, "Oh, we need you to be a weekly podcast." I was like, "I don't want to talk about Islamophobia on a weekly basis. It's going to be terrible for my mental health. It's horrible." So like we're a monthly podcast, and it's advertisers don't really like that because they want to like make more money. And yeah, I think that's just the question.
Wait, what was the question?
Yeah, no.
Sorry, the question is, how did your show get in Apple Podcasts for Black History Month? Like, how do you, when you're, especially like, there's always this dance, right, with niche shows, where we strive for, engagement over quantity. Quantity's nice, but 10 people who are fired up are great compared to 100 people who don't really give a shit.
Yeah. No, to Taz's point, I was very fortunate just because myself and my co-hosts were both writers. So, I mean, we're in The Root, we're in New York Times, we're in Pitchfork, we're in all these big, massive publications. So, like her, we came in with an audience. So getting these people on our show. But as far as like the show itself, I guess through those relationships that we built, it also draws attention to you, and you just never know who's listening. So I mean, that's how we ended up doing a live show at South by Southwest. That's how we're able to do live shows throughout the country. Just really just kind of pulling into our relationships, and as well as people that are fans of our show. I mean, I get like about 100 emails a week. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. It might even be more than that, but people just trying to get on it. Just as far as like, publicists hitting us up, CBS hitting us up, like different companies just getting in there. So I guess it's just really just about just forging those relationships and just really leveraging them and just using your network.
Leverage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to just take the last couple minutes to take any questions. Did you have a question? So much to say on this. We've been around for 4 years. We didn't get our LLC until this year, which means that we weren't selling ads on our show until this year. Our first 6 to 1 year of the show, 6 months to 1 year of the show, a lot of networks wanted to buy us. A lot of networks wanted to have us be on their show, but they wanted to own our brand and they wanted to control our messaging. And then we said, nope. We don't want white people to control our brand. We're going to control our own story. Because of that, we had to compromise on money over value. And so we've been a DIY, no money operation for 4 years. Even though we were on Oprah, even though we were at South by Southwest, even though we had all this accolade and success, we had to kind of say if we want to own our own story, we don't have an option to make money right now. Now we're selling ads, but we're still a DIY operation. We're not making that much money on our ads because we are once a month. We make maybe $400 a month for our show. And this is we've been around for a really long time. So I think this is something which I feel very passionately about because I don't think we should not be making money. I feel like we should be making money, but because money. Women of color and our stories aren't valued in the same way that white stories are, white male stories are, that we're just not getting those opportunities. And it's not even opportunities, because we're not willing to compromise, we're having to sacrifice money.
Yeah, she definitely touched on a lot of things I was about to say. But I think also too is that to her point, in us reaching out to our audience, the business that we want to do with a lot of POC businesses, they have much less resources than the resources that are a lot of these major companies. So instead of doing an ad with a Casper or something like that for $400, you might get offered $40 for some clothing company. You know what I mean? So I think that stems a lot of it too, is that we're working within businesses that have a much smaller profit margin and are able to afford less money. But I think too, to that point, is that we were in the same position in which we were having people trying to snatch us up. And I felt honestly, they were trying to buy into blackness, and I just wasn't with it. I just was not with it. So I've had I had a meeting with Vice 2-3 weeks ago. So we've had a lot of people that have reached out and have tried to buy us out to an extent. But I think it's just a matter of maintaining your morals and kind of like she said, do you want to get the bag or do you want to be able to look your kids in the face and maintain your community in the face and maintain your integrity. Me personally, I've been fortunate in that we've been able to monetize the show, through live shows and a lot of other things, and as far as selling my services as a podcaster and everything else, or speaker and things like that. But we definitely have to get more creative because we don't have that backing and those resources or those opportunities that a lot of people get.
I think very quickly, especially when it comes to women, we are not necessarily being mindful about when women can listen and when women are listening, especially the different generational, like women of different generations. Like, for example, I was at my physical therapist yesterday, and I was saying, oh, the podcast, and she was like, I don't even know how to get a podcast. And this woman's like 53 years old. She's not 85. And I don't think we've done a great job of meeting women where they are and having them figure out. I said, what kind of phone do you have? She said, I have an iPhone. I said, oh, okay, well, you have an app that's built in, and she didn't even know it. So I think I just want to see more. The more we have people in positions of power, the more it filters down. The more we have people who are looking out for other people, the more it filters down. So having you in a space where you're being mindful, I think is the first step, right? Do we have time for one more? One more? Any other question? All right, well then with that, I'll just say thank you guys so much.